Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for coming for this short notice press conference about the situation of human rights in Tunisia. As you know, the situation in Tunisia is deteriorating very rapidly in the last few days and few weeks, certainly also few months. We had a number of arrests of politicians. More recently, we had a number of what they were saying politicians going on hunger strikes inside the jail. The main reason why they are on hunger strike is they don't know why they are even arrested. Normally, in any country where there is justice, where there is some semblance of justice and human rights, the case before the person is arrested, there is a case against him. He knows or she knows why they are arrested. They are accused of certain charges. So the government does all the preliminary research before they arrest somebody. In Tunisia, they're doing it the different way. So they arrest somebody, they put them in jail, and then okay, we'll interrogate you and we'll find that they don't know why they were arrested. They just know they are arrested. They are being interrogated. And the government is hoping that they will find something against them. So now many of them have been in jail for now 7, 8 months, some of them longer, 10 and 12 months, without knowing why they are being in jail. And that's why they have started some, hunger strikes. We wanted to highlight the situation here in Washington, D.C., and especially to the media. That's why we are organizing this press conference. We're delighted to have with us former President Moncef Marzouki, who is a human rights activist all his life. So he has been at the forefront of the struggle for human rights and democracy in Tunisia, certainly since the 80s, maybe even before that. And so we're delighted that he is here to give us his views and his update on the situation there. We have also the representative of Amnesty International today with us, responsible for the MENA region. Amnesty has issued a report recently on the situation of human rights and pre-trial detention. So she will give us a summary of that report. And we have some Tunisian human rights organizations who are working, like CSID, like the Tunisian Network, on trying to defend human rights and democracy in Tunisia and in the region. And also we are happy to have Rghebi. She's the daughter of one of the prisoners. She came from London, from UK specifically, this press conference, to highlight the case of her father and the suffering of her father, who is in jail now for 7 or 8 months in very, very bad conditions. So we will continue to do our best to highlight what's going on, and we urge you as organizations to defend human rights, to speak up, to issue statements, to do whatever you can to defend human rights and democracy in Tunisia and across the region. So let's start with the former President, Mr. Marzouki. Welcome, Mr. Rghebi.
Well, welcome to all of you. Thank you for your presence here. Your business is happening in Tunisia. This morning, I received a text message from the President of Tunisia saying that more than 6 democratic leaders are now on hunger strike to support the hunger strike of Sheikh Ghannouchi and Jaouhar Ben Mbarek. I feel really, very, very, very sad, because it reminds me of the 90s. In the 90s also, there were wave of hunger strike because at the time we were under the hard dictatorship of the army, and a lot of people in prison on hunger strike. And I at the time we outside Tunisia, we used to try to support our prisoner of war by participating symbolically to this hunger strike. I must say that I would like to convey my support leaders of the democratic opposition now in prison. I would like to convey them my support, my admiration, my hope in peace. I would say I am going to participate also symbolically with them, because this is the only way I can really express my deepest feeling towards all my friends now in jail. This is my first message to the prisoner of war, that we're not alone, that we will do everything for freedom, because you are fighting for our freedom. Now I would like to send also the message to the Butch's president, saying, hey, you are starting a new cycle of repression, of mock elections, and this won't work. It didn't work for Ghannouchi. It didn't work for Marzouki, but it won't work for you. So instead of repeating yourself, repeating this tragedy, so please stop it. I urge you to free all the political prisoners, and to be very careful, because you have within this prison, you have an old man named Ghannouchi, played an important role in the fight for democracy in Tunisia. This man is 82 years old. He's ill. I know it because I'm a physician also. So be very careful, because if this man, this respected man, died in jail, you'll be accountable for murder, because you do know that putting a man like this in the condition where our prison, that's a death penalty sentence. So release this man, release all the other human rights activists, release all Democrats, because it's useless. Everybody knows that the charging are fake, and everybody knows that your judiciary has it's under your control, and in the whole world they know that Tunisia is now under populist dictatorship. So we won't, everybody knows what's going on really in Tunisia. So let us stop this nonsense policy, because it has been used so many times and it failed, and it will be failed. I would like also to convey a message to the judiciary and to the security forces to say, hey, don't let this man, because this man will live. I left in Parasat country, and he will also leave Parasat country. And be careful, because you could be, because you could be charged on massive violation of the Tunisian law, and I wish you not to be part of this new wave of repression. So stay away of this man, stay away of this policy, because it will be a mess. It will be also exactly the same happening for you, and it will end in a very, very bad way. I would like to send the message to the opposition that now we should really give an accountability to the country. We should unite, and we should be give once again to the Tunisian possibility to be confident, to know that the fact that the alternative is not whether it will be this dictatorship or an armor. In fact, the divide must be between Democrats and anti-democrats, and not between Islamists and secularists. And we must do everything to give our the new possibility, the new chance to build up this democratic state that we have failed the first time. But I am here in the United States, in Mexico, and I would like to also convey a message that our friends, I do know that we have a lot of friends here in the Biden administration and in the civil society, to say, for the civil society, please stand up for the rights of the political prisoners to get to recover their freedom. They are fighting for the freedom everywhere. It means that they are also fighting for human freedom. As far as the administration is concerned, of course, I do believe that it's our job to restore democracy. It's not up to the American Congress. We have to do the job, and we're going to do the job. But please, I'm always asked whether I support any kind of restriction of economic aid to the population. I say no. Please go ahead, support our people, support our nation, support our state, even if it is for the moment under control of the army position, because the population is suffering, poverty is growing, and misery of the population is really stable. So you need your help, even if unfortunately Tunisia is under the control of a rough state and now democratic regime, etc. Those are the key messages conveyed to the nation, to the president, and to the government, and be sure that I always say that people think that the Arab Spring is over, and I'm repeating to people every day that it's not true. The Arab Spring is just the beginning of the beginning. So thank you for your support.
Thank you, Mr. President Marzouki. One of the things that he repeats all the time is that the Arab Spring is not a good name. The proper name, or the more accurate name, is the Arab volcano. Because there are volcanoes, and you don't know when they're going to erupt. And that's what happened in 2011. It happened even before 2011. It happened after 2011. As long as we have oppressive regimes that abuse the rights of their citizens and that treat their opponents as if they are criminals, these eruptions will continue. Now, it's my pleasure to welcome Elizabeth from Amnesty International. She's going to summarize their findings and their that were included in the report that was issued this. Rghebi.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here with you today, for those of you joining us in person and online, to speak about Amnesty's documentation of the human rights situation in Tunisia. So my remarks, I'll focus on two things. I'd like to start by giving an overview of the wider human rights context within Tunisia, and then move to talk a bit more about the issue of repression of freedom of expression and the stifling of political opposition through the use of pretrial detention. Over the last 2 years, we've seen a worrying pattern of human rights deterioration in Tunisia, which has been an unfortunate development after the 2011 revolution ushered in progress on human rights in the country. This increase in human rights abuses comes after President CSID's power grab in July of 2021, when he dissolved parliament and granted himself unchecked powers to govern and legislate, after which he proceeded to issue dozens of decree laws without review or oversight by any other body. Throughout this period, the Tunisian authorities have taken further steps towards repression by jailing dozens of political opponents and state critics and dismantling institutional human rights safeguards. The president has also undermined the independence of Tunisia's judiciary by issuing 2 decrees granting himself the power to intervene in the careers of judges and prosecutors, including the power to arbitrarily dismiss them. In June of last year, the president dismissed 57 judges based on vague and politically motivated accusations. Last year, a new constitution was adopted that was drafted by the president that increased the powers of the presidency and further undermined the independence of the judiciary. Its adoption followed a rushed process that did not include consultation with civil society or other political parties. Tunisia is facing a real threat that it will be pulled back to pre-revolution levels of repression. Throughout 2023, the human rights situation has continued to deteriorate further. This year, we've witnessed xenophobic and racist comments by the president that triggered a wave of violence against Black African migrants, refugees, and asylum seekers in the country. So that's a bit of the overall human rights context within which we're working. Now I'm going to shift and talk a bit more about freedom of expression and stifling of the opposition. So since the president executed his power grab in July of 2021, there's been a notable uptick in the repression of freedom of expression by Tunisian authorities. Amnesty has documented the cases of at least 39 people who have been investigated or prosecuted merely for exercising their right to freedom of expression. These charges leveled against them include insulting the authorities or spreading fake news, which are not recognized offenses under international law. In a further move to repress freedom of expression, President Said also issued a decree law, which is a draconian cybercrime law that affords the authorities wide-ranging powers to crack down on freedom of expression online. Since its adoption, the authorities have used this law to initiate investigations against at least 9 people, including journalists, lawyers, and political activists over public comments that they have made that were critical of the authorities, in particular President Said and former Prime Minister Rghebi. In this regard, Amnesty is calling on the Tunisian authorities to immediately cease their crackdown on freedom of expression, which is steadily undoing the hard-won achievements of the 2011 revolution. With respect to civic space, the president has also accused civil society groups of serving the interests of foreign powers, saying that he intended to ban funding from abroad. A restrictive draft law was leaked that deals with the creation of associations. And if adopted, this legislation would remove crucial protections covering the right to freedom of association, as it gives authorities overly broad powers and discretion to interfere with the way civil society organizations are formed, their functions and operations, their funding, and their ability to speak publicly about their work and to express their views. So with respect to this draft law, Amnesty is calling on the authorities to immediately drop any further consideration of this leaked draft law and ensure that any future laws regulating civil society organizations adhere strictly to international human rights law. Lastly, I'd like to touch on the authorities' stifling of political opposition and the abuse of pre-trial detention. Tunisian authorities have used vague provisions in the law governing pre-trial detention to jail a series of high-profile opponents, public figures, and perceived enemies of President Said. This has been done without showing that the measure is reasonable and necessary as required by international law. And these detentions highlight a deepening regression for human rights and judicial independence in Tunisia. Amnesty has documented the cases of 22 people held in pre-trial detention on a range of accusations. This includes politicians, political activists, and lawyers. 8 of these individuals have been accused of conspiracy against the state, an accusation that Amnesty deems unfounded. Other accusations leveled against these individuals include offenses relating to terrorism and financial misconduct. Most of the 22 people have been held for at least 5 months and one for almost 2 years. In all 22 cases, according to their lawyers, the authorities have presented either vague or no grounds at all to justify their pre-trial detention. Lawyers have filed requests, but as of mid-September, the courts had provisionally released only 2 out of the 22 people total. The Tunisian authorities have especially targeted members of Ennahda, the country's largest opposition party, initiating criminal investigations against its members. At least 19 of the mentioned 22 cases are members of Ennahda, at least 11 of whom remain in pre-trial detention, including one man who has been held for a year. And 6 people have been held since February this year in the so-called conspiracy case, which I already just said that, sorry. With respect to the conspiracy case that I just mentioned, an investigative judge placed at least 8 of those accused in pre-trial detention, citing only the gravity of the acts attributed to them. And since July, the court has released only 2 of them, while placing them under a travel ban and banning them from appearing in public spaces, and extended pre-trial detention for the remaining 6. As was already mentioned, in April of this year, the authorities arrested Rached, the leader of Ennahda and the former speaker of Tunisia's dissolved parliament. And they are investigating him on charges that include conspiracy against the state and trying to change the nature of the state. This past May, an anti-terrorism court sentenced him to 1 year in prison over public remarks he made at a funeral in which he praised the deceased as a courageous man who did not fear a ruler or tyrant. And as was mentioned, he is now on hunger strike as of Friday and has been joined by a few other individuals wrongfully imprisoned. So in addition to political opposition, judges and businessmen have also been targeted by these policies. One example, Bashir Rghebi, a prominent former judge, has been arrested twice and had 2 pretrial detention orders against him in connection with his work as a judge. The detention orders relate to parallel investigations, and he is among the 57 judges that were arbitrarily dismissed last year. And in my final example, Mehdi Ben Mbarek, a prominent businessman and former Minister of Relations with Constitutional Bodies, Civil Society, and Human Rights, was arrested in October 2021, and this arrest came after vows by President Said to crack down on what he described as corrupt business people and other elites. With respect to pretrial detention, Tunisia's Code of Criminal Procedure gives judges wide leeway with respect to this issue. In effect, it is relatively easy for judges to impose pretrial detention and comparatively hard for subjects to challenge it. Amnesty is calling on the authorities to release all those who have been arbitrarily detained and refrain from using criminal investigations and prosecutions against political opponents, human rights activists, and others simply for exercising their rights to freedom of expression and peaceful assembly. And to wrap up, I would like to talk just a minute about what Amnesty is calling for with respect to the international community and the United States government. Amnesty remains seriously concerned about the pattern of human rights backsliding in Tunisia, and we're calling on the authorities to uphold their international obligations. With respect to the international community, we are urging them to give the situation in Tunisia the urgent attention it requires. And more specifically, we are calling on the US government to ensure that it is to protect human rights in its relationship with the Tunisian government by ensuring that it is not supporting directly or indirectly any of these human rights violations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. One of the points that she talked about, which I think is very important, is the independence of the judiciary. There are cases and trials everywhere in the world. The government can accuse anybody of anything. So it's important to have an independent judiciary that's not under the control of the executive branch. That's the best protection, maybe the only protection to check against the executive abusing the rights of its opponents. So after the revolution of 2011, the Constitution of 2014 established an independent judicial high council elected by the judges themselves. And this independent judicial council was completely independent of the executive. They are the one who appoint judges, they are the one who replace judges, and so on. Well, one of the first things that CSID did is he replaced this independent judicial council with the new one, after rewriting the law, he gave himself the right to fire judges, to hire judges, and to replace judges at will. So the new body of judicial council, they are all appointed by CSID himself, and he can fire them at any time. And then recently, about 3 or 4 months ago, he said that if any judge releases these political prisoners, then he is a sympathizer, or he's sympathizing with the criminals, and therefore he's a criminal himself. So he's threatening publicly on TV, threatening the judges not to release these opponents. So that's the new condition. This is what's going on now in Tunisia, is we don't have an independent judicial system anymore. So CSID can arrest anybody he wants, and he can sentence anybody, because simply the judges are obeying out of fear or out of trying to keep their jobs, or out of, they're obeying the orders of the Ministry of Justice and the Ministry of Interior. So this is why the situation is very alarming. I'd like to invite Ghannouchi first. Jaouhar. Okay, we have Jaouhar Ferjani. She's the daughter of one of the political prisoners, Mr. Ferjani, in Tunisia. So she's going to highlight what's going on with some of the prisoners of the project.
thank you all for joining us today. It's ironic that my dad was here probably around 30 years ago. He was doing a similar thing in crutches at the time because he'd been imprisoned under the Ben Ali regime, where he was really tortured to the point where he would be comatose for 5 days, his back was broken. But as soon as he left Tunisia, he lived in the UK in exile, and he was here advocating for the release of political prisoners at the time. Like I said, it's not his first arrest. I was 3 years old when I witnessed the first time he was arrested. And like I said, the conditions weren't the best. And at the time, the repression was extremely intense. And while in Tunisia, we haven't reached that level of torture again, we're seeing all the signs that it's slowly going back there. I mean, with regards to, for instance, Judge Bashir Akmi, when he was mentioned, when they arrested him, they put him in a dark room, they played loud music, they drugged him, they wouldn't let him sleep. So we're noticing signs of slowly going back to what we used to have. My dad, for instance, is in prison. He shares a cell with 120 people in a capacity of 60 people. They're all chain smokers. They have one public toilet in the middle of the cell. During the summer, where temperatures rose to around 55 degrees, there was infestations. They haven't cleaned it. And like I said, because of the smoking and the damp, my dad has been in and out of hospital with chest infections. He's never had to rely on an inhaler before, and he has an inhaler now. He's had issues with his heart, and in the prison that he's in, because it's away from the capital where most of the other prisons are, it's often neglected, and I think that a lot of the prison guards have been taking advantage of the fact that a lot of the prisoners that aren't in the capital are being purely for I guess, logistical reasons, not seen as much. And so they're at the whims and the mercy of these prison guards, where at times they don't get any medical care or medical treatment until things are so bad that they're sent to hospital in emergency. But even then, still handcuffed, it's still in a police van. And that's the case for my father. That was the case for another prisoner called who has diabetes, and he doesn't get his medicine until again he's sent to hospital, and then they're scared that it could go too far. My father's case is actually complicated because it's completely absurd. So he's been charged with possibly being associated with a digital PR company. Now, this is something that probably most of the people in DC are somehow associated with some kind of PR company, a lobbying company. So you can imagine if you came here, 90% of the constituents here would be in jail purely for being associated with a digital company that sometimes does some lobbying work. And again, my father is not even associated with this company. In fact, when he was sent to prison, the judge himself said my father was never a suspect, and yet he was sent to be questioned about something he was never associated with, and sent to pre-trial detention while they searched for evidence. Now, the Tunisia before the coup, this was illegal, just the same way it would be illegal elsewhere. And also, just returning to the what we've mentioned here about the judiciary, we had an independent judiciary, and now we've got a judiciary that has been used and abused. And while there are some corrupt judges, there are many judges that are trying to do their work, and some, because they don't want to fall into the threats of the authoritarian regime, they are constantly taking sick leave so that they're not sending innocent people to jail. They are, when they have sent people to jail, they've been visibly crying and shaking. In the case of Judge Bashir Akmi, the judge that sent him to jail, his family contacted him and said, "Why did you send my father to jail?" And in fact, this guy, he's a student of Bashir al-Assad, and he said it was either him or me. So that's the place that the judiciary are in right now. Like we've mentioned before, the prisoners are from across the political spectrum. Another, and those who are willing to form a coalition as an opposition to the regime have been sent to prison, one of which is Rghebi, who is a politician, a human rights activist, and a lawyer. He was sent to prison almost 8 months ago for the conspiracy against the state. Again, a very vague conspiracy. It could mean anything in Tunisia right now, but what we do know is that the charge, the sentence could lead to death for a lot of the prisoners. His son has been summoned because of his activist work in regards to his dad. He's been summoned under these broad cyber security crimes, and if he returns to Tunisia, he could be facing jail time too. I also want to mention that while we talk about political prisoners, we have had a death as well. In 2022, during one of the protests, the coalition protests against the authoritarian regime, Riyad Hussein was killed. He was at the protest. Initially, the government lied about where he was. Meanwhile, we found out later that police took him, beat him up, and he was found dead in a hospital. And we need to also remember that there are people that I think haven't been mentioned because they're not necessarily prominent political figures. And just to go back to why I'm initially here, obviously we have been working in a coalition, especially the children of the political prisoners, and we're all from different, people that used to argue before from across the political aisles, human rights activists, judges, children, Islamists, left. We're all now working together. We're doing cases together. We're helping each other out. And I hope that people see that, well, we're working together for people to work with us as well. And just to get back to that, today, before this, I found out that my father has also been added to the conspiracy against the state case, where the charges are, again, the death penalty, and that he will be beginning his hunger strike tomorrow. And so I urge everyone to support most of the people in prison now, especially the ones from Nahda, this isn't their first time. They're now in their late 60s, in their 70s, and in their 80s, and time is of the essence to help them.
Thank you very much, Jaouhar. One of the things I wanted to highlight is here in this town or in many other capitals, they say, why doesn't the opposition unite? This conspiracy case is simply the opposition leaders getting together to unite, to form a front against the dictatorship. That's what the conspiracy consists of. Somebody like Jaouhar Turki, he was a politician before, but he resigned from politics 10 years ago. He's basically a civil society activist. He was trying to organize meetings between the various politicians so that the opposition can have a common agenda to restore democracy. That's what this conspiracy is. Jaouhar now is in jail for 8 months because he met with some politicians and because he organized some meetings with politicians from different political parties trying to discuss how they can work together to re-establish democracy in Tunisia. That's what is considered now by society as a conspiracy against the state. Political leaders meeting to discuss how to restore democracy. And Jaouhar Turki, that's all he did. Is he organized these meetings to try to bring the different sides together. Our final panelist or speaker for this event today is Moncef, President of the Tunisian United Network.
Thank you, Radwan. Thank you for organizing this important press conference. It is a pleasure and honor to be on the same stage with President Marzouki and with the rest of the esteemed panelists. As I was walking into this room, it was interesting because I remembered a few years ago, we were in this very room with celebrating democracy. Telling the officials that you need to support democracy. If you remember that year, for some reason, the Senate held about $60 or $70 million in aid. And we came together quickly, us and other groups and other organizations, to tell them, no, that's the wrong move to do. You need to add more to the budget, not take less. And here we are again a few years later, talking about this catastrophe, as I may call it, that happened in Tunisia in this coup. Quickly, there's a lot to talk about. There's a lot of people who are in jail. These are leaders. These are quality leaders. We're not talking any ordinary person that they lose their right. That's a problem. That's a catastrophe in itself. But when you have a leader who has followers behind it, who has a party behind it, who has a movement behind it, and you put them in jail, then you are actually trying to destroy fundamental freedoms and rights of all people in Tunisia. And the quality of these people that they are in jail, ISIS jail, is a problem, and it could cause, and hopefully not, it would cause rippling effect in Tunisia. 3 points I want to highlight. First of all, as the president of Tunisia United Network, which is it's an American organization. We are American. We are Tunisians who live in America. We are active in America. We vote. We lobby our representatives in Congress and in the government, and that's our right. That's an honor for us to do, and that's the patriotic thing for us, especially when you know. But for all these years, we've been pushing this government, the US, to support and to add more to all the sectors. We told them to increase the budget for the military. We told them to increase the budget in the economy. We told them to increase the budget for the NGOs. All of those. And we did not say increase it for this person and not that person, or for this government against that government. We actually were asked throughout the years, since the revolution until the coup, we kept asking the US government to support democracy, no matter who comes to power, no matter which party is governing, no matter who's the president in Qatar. And so I just want to make sure that that's, and so we're consistent. We are still on that path. We're going to still continue. Today, we come and to highlight some of the issues that we see in the US policy toward Tunisia. Yes, they are probably, if you compare them to other countries, they are probably the most forward-leaning of these countries. That's true. However, we still think that there's room, there's things that needs to be done that the US government is not doing. For example, tomorrow, Sheikh is going to a military court. She's a civilian. She's going to a military court. Why is Sheikh presented in front of military court? The US should question this, should pose this question directly to the military leadership in Tunisia. And if there's no reason, and no good reason, I don't think there is, then the US should hold some of its help to the military, should put some of the money that allocates, to the military, should put it on hold until things change, and we take concrete steps to change this. There is a bill in Congress right now being discussed called the Safeguarding Tunisian Democracy, and it calls for withholding 25% of aid to the military, or at least the aid to Tunisia. That the Congress needs to pass, and needs to pass urgently. The second point I want to make is the issue of criminalizing meeting with diplomats and US officials. This is on record. When we talk about the conspiracy that many of these people, including Sheikh Maisa and Khayyam al-Turki and Hamid al-Jlasi and all these folks, who are accused of conspiring against the state. Who are they conspiring with? It is listed. They have them listed, including, the ambassador of Italy, the former and the present, including Heather Kalmbach and Natasha Francisca, who are working as attachés in the US Embassy. So meaning that meeting with these officials is criminal, according to at least this conspiracy theory that they are pushing. However, the judge who is presiding over the investigation of this case, they issued a statement telling all these diplomats that no, don't believe what the lawyers are telling you. Diplomats are respected in Tunisia. Continue doing your work. There's no issues. So in that sentence, they are confessing that meeting with diplomats is not a conspiracy. However, when the lawyers moved to request that these officials, if they are named in this case, they need to be questioned. They need to be called to issue statements. Then some of these two lawyers, including Islam Hamza and I believe the sister of Dalila Sadr, who is the sister of Jaouhar Ben Mbarek, they are called to be questioned also, and hopefully, hopefully, nothing would happen, but they're going to be questioned and intimidated, so they don't talk about this case because the judge issued a gag order against discussing this case in public because it's a shameful case. It's an empty case, and when the lawyers told the judge that if you are exonerating these diplomats who met with our clients, then you should exonerate our clients and let them go. If they did not, if you are admitting that nothing happened in those meetings, there's nothing against the law in those meetings, then our clients should be also let go. So, so we don't know how the judge is going to react to this request, but at least we know that the lawyers requested officially from all these countries, the US, Italy, and others, to speak and to issue statements on this. But they did not hear back. And so here, my point, at least from here, we asked the US government to allow these diplomats to speak about these. What took place in these meetings? Is there anything illegal that took place in this meeting? Since there is no implications, there's nothing is going to happen to you because the government said it's okay. But at least, tell us, because this is the case, all of it is based on meeting with foreign diplomats. So I think the US owes it to these, and they know pretty much all of them. They know that they are innocent. So at least speak up and speak the truth. Tell the judge and tell the public, more importantly, what took place in these meetings. And so we can talk about the different faces that we see. I see in one of the posters, Rida Bouzayan. He's somebody who went in a protest. I believe it was January 14th, and then he was missing after that for a few days, and then to find out later, his family found out that he's actually in the hospital, and I think a couple days later he was declared dead. No investigation. The man is in good health. There's nothing wrong with him when he went into this protest, but a few days later he is dead, and there's no, I believe the testimony, at least we have from the doctor, is that he died from cardiac heart arrest because of torture, possible torture, or possible pressure on him. And so I remember the Tunisian United Network filed a lawsuit here in the US on his behalf and on behalf of Mr. Bhiri, who, if we remember, for a long time, he was kidnapped from his home. He did not even know who took him. And then later on, we know that he went to the hospital, and we lived all that drama together. So we filed a lawsuit against the interior minister, against the person who's in charge of the president, I believe it's Yahyawi, who's in charge of the presidential guard, because they were involved in his kidnapping. And so at the same time, we requested officially and we say it because it's not a secret, we filed a report with the State Department, categorizing, putting in context, and at least in terms of the law, what the Human Rights Watch said, what the Amnesty International and other reports. We put it in a legal report and we submit it to the State Department, saying these are sanctionable items. These people violated the Constitution, violated the freedoms and the rights of Tunisians, and therefore, by the U.S. law, it gives the right to the State Department, specifically the Secretary of State, to sanction these individuals, and we requested the sanctioning of at least 4 officials from the US government. These are things we do in public. We do it because we believe in that the Tunisian and the US relationship has to be built on principles of freedom, of democracy, of dignity for all sides. We're not doing it and in corners, we're not doing it in secret, we do it in public. And if you want a copy, we'll send you a copy. So I hope that we're going to continue this. I see a couple of members of our Tunisian United Network are here. We're going to continue to do this work because we believe in the just cause of the Tunisian democracy. And like this, the banner says, let's save our democracy. It is savable. We can do it. But we all have to put our hands together and do it for the right reason. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Munji. Before we conclude this press conference, I just want to say that one of the people in jail today is Mr. Rached Ghannouchi. He is the Speaker of the House, the former Speaker of the House, and elected Speaker of the Parliament. He is the founding member and leader of the Nahda Party, the largest political party in Tunisia. He is a scholar of Islam and democracy. He has written over 20 books on Islam and democracy that have been translated to over 25 languages all over the world. He's well known and well respected all over the Muslim world. He's 82 years old, and he's today on hunger strike in jail. And we are very, very concerned about his health. A lot of other people now are joining this hunger strike. Today, our former president himself, Mr. Marzouki, just announced that he is going on hunger strike. Either today or tomorrow, I don't know exactly when, but he will announce it. He's going on a hunger strike. A lot of other people in Tunisia and outside of Tunisia are going on a hunger strike because it's the last resort. It's the last thing that we can do, they can do to express our support, our sympathy, our feeling of with what's going on in Tunisia and with the repressive nature of this regime, which came to destroy the only successful democracy in the Arab world. For 10 years, Tunisia was considered free by most of the organizations in the world and democratic. It was not a perfect democracy. It had its own shortcomings and in some cases failures. But democracy is never perfect. But it was a democracy, and now we lost that. And we urge everybody to support democracy in Tunisia, to support the Tunisian people and politicians, civil society, political parties, judges, lawyers. We have to remember that the lawyers are also suffering, and many lawyers are in jail or have been arrested and are threatened to be arrested, as mentioned. Islam Hamza and Jalil Musaddaq are now threatened to be arrested simply because they defended. But they're not alone. There are many other lawyers who have been threatened. We say to CSID that we will continue our fight for democracy. We started to fight for democracy some 30 or 40 years ago. We will continue this fight. We believe that democracy is the best form of government, and that democracy can deliver results for the people better than dictatorship. Some of the Tunisian people, especially the youth, they were disappointed with the 10 years of democracy, but now they have tried dictatorship of CSID, and they've seen how worse the situation has gotten under CSID and under dictatorship. So let's go back to democracy. Let's resolve our differences through the democratic process, through elections, through freedom of expression, through political contestation, but without jailing and without arresting people for their ideas and for speaking up and expressing their opinions. So if you have any questions, if you don't have any questions, we'll just end the video conference. Any questions? Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you for coming, and we look forward to seeing you